Over on OneNewsNow.com, there's a story that reminds us that in the name of tolerance, we're encouraged not to say Jesus. The president of a Connecticut university has incurred condemnation from critics who say her rebuke of a coach for his referencing Jesus at practice was just out of bounds. University of Connecticut President Susan Herbst says assistant football coach Ernest Jones cannot appear to endorse or advocate for a particular religion. Matt Staver of the Liberty Counsel says that the president has it all wrong. What the coach did is perfectly permissible to do. It brings cohesion and unity to the team. He's not excluding anyone of any faith or no faith. The reaction of the university president, on the other hand, goes way too far, says the attorney. Fox Sports reported that Jones was discussing religious faith in an interview with The Current, the college newspaper, when he said faith in Jesus should be the center of our huddle. Staver says most of America's colleges and universities began with religious intent, and many today still have religious mottos and mission statements. Considering that the reaction of Jones clearly underscores what's wrong with our public education system, says the attorney Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. That's over at OneNewsNow.com, and we didn't discuss that story the day it came out, but it certainly applies. There is a concerted effort by those that are in key influential positions of power, be it academic, be it culturally in Hollywood and in some of the pinnacle places of entertainment, whether it be in politics, certainly, whether it be in public policy, in our public schools, in our colleges and university systems. There is a concerted effort to wipe out, to exterminate the presence of the God of the Bible. The bibliocentric idea that Jesus is Messiah and that he has a role to play in our lives is systematically under attack at every point. Bob Vander of the Family Leader, familyleader.org is the website, and if714.com is the website for the book that Bob has recently authored. The foreword was written by Mike Huckabee. It's a very fast read, only 140-ish pages. You probably knock it down in one night, but it is a great reminder of a passage of Scripture that we need to apply. And Bob, what I liked about what you did is you kind of broke it down phrase by phrase so that every phrase is expounded and there's more meaning given to it, practical application of how we can walk through that verse in our own life. But I want to go back to what I opened the segment with, and that is the systematic extermination of faith in the public market could be discouraging to followers of Jesus. It could be discouraging to family values people because it's easy to wake up and say, hey, we can't win. Everything that's out there opposes us. If that's true, then the expression of our faith in private, the practice of our faith in our closet must become all that much more active. Agree or disagree?
I totally agree. Let me say a couple things. First of all, to the president of the university, maybe she should talk to the fans in the stands and tell them to stop using the name of Jesus. Because that's usually what happens is that they call out Jesus in a profane way in regards to a bad play on the football field or on the basketball court or whatever versus uniting a team around Jesus and even the Christian principles, which I think any common sense human being say that's a very good principle. Love your neighbor as yourself, and those types of things, those kinds of standards. But I agree with you, Kevin, is that Paul would say, don't be surprised when those who don't know Christ act out like they don't know Christ, because that's the way it's going to be. But that's why God pursues his people, us as Christians, and why we need to take that sincerely, and what we talk about in If 714, that we do pray authentically. We humble ourselves to seek his face. And we also act out on that faith by the action step of turning from our indifferent or wicked way. Another translation for wicked in that verse is indifferent. There's a lot of people in our culture today, good Christian men and women, who have bought into the idea of if it doesn't impact me one way or the other, why should I care? It's because God says, be hot or cold, but he wants us to care.
I couldn't agree more. Let's take a couple of calls. And friends, if you've got a comment or a question for Bob, maybe you'd like to know a little bit about how you merge the spiritual with the political. Bob's walked the life of doing that. But let's at least open up the phone lines and give people a chance to interact. 888-589-8840. And let's go to Mark, who's been on hold from Mississippi. Mark, you're on with Kevin McCullough and Bob Vander. Glad to have you with us.
Great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you taking my call. I've been listening to you since you've been on AFR. And, one of the things that I see as a core root issue in our political system, and no one seems to really address this and maybe doesn't know how to address it, but the issue that, and I heard Tony Perkins had a senator on the other day that had mentioned the fact that he had spent $7 million of his own money to get to Washington, D.C., so he wasn't there in vain. The thing that I see, though, is that it seems as though unless you're a millionaire, you can't get to the position of being able to make these decisions and invoking Jesus' name as what he had said. It's harder for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get to heaven. So the biggest issue I see, a core issue in our governmental leadership, is that all we have to vote for, even when they're supposedly conservatives, is rich people. And sort of taking an analogy of the military, a senior master sergeant or a top NCO usually knows a whole lot more about the people and the jobs and what's actually going on than the top officer. And that's sort of the same as what we've got, to me, in Washington, D.C., is that we've got a bunch of top officers that don't know what the real issues are because they're beyond that. And instead of having actual down-to-earth Americans that are actually helping to solve and address the issues and make the laws. Thank you for taking my call.
All right, Mark, I didn't detect a question, but Bob, your reaction to the assertion that politics is a rich man's game and that the average person is going to be eliminated from the equation because the rich man won't understand where the middle class or the poor are coming from.
Well, Mark is right. There's no doubt that money plays a very heavy hand in the political process, and too many times, unfortunately, it determines who actually gets elected to office. There's no question that money has the correlation of holding public office. But that's why when we talk about revival and God's people becoming engaged in a culture for revival, because God also instituted government, which means that's part of the process as well. But when people become engaged, they get serious about a revival prayer and then taking action steps. That's when God's people can rise up, surround themselves around a Christian man or woman who is called to run for public office, and either resource them in such a way or to gather around them in such a way to hopefully elevate them so that they can be in public office. Because I believe God also honors those public officials who call for revival in the public square and in our culture. And we have some shining lights who did defeat the big money and the establishment, one of whom would be Ted Cruz out of the state of Texas, who are thrilled to be a United States Senator today. But he kind of did, and his people, his supporters, they really rallied around him to get him to win a very tough primary and then a general election to give him in a position today. And I believe he's having an impact because of where he's at today. So there is hope, although Mark is right. Money does play a heavy hand in the political process.
But does it have to mean that people that are of means can't understand or affect the plight of those that are not wealthy for long term? I coming from a household that was lower middle class growing up and certainly solid middle class since I've been an adult. It's one of those things where I think if you do not succeed, people that go from not having as much to having more or growing in terms of the amount of wealth that they've accumulated, they have actually figured out on some level how to be successful at what they do. problem solving, people skills, product development, service delivery, whatever it is that they got to that level. I kind of want problem solvers to be sent to Washington, but the issue is they have to be people of character. In other words, the wholehearted person of who they are is number one, first and foremost, the issue. But we shouldn't be surprised if people of character also happen to have success if they have come by that success honestly. That's exactly the kind of problem solver we're looking for, would it not be?
Well, it is. And remember, I mean, this probably goes to Mark's question as well, is that the Scriptures doesn't say having money is evil.
Right.
The Scripture says the love of money is evil. You can't serve two masters. And so if money has you or you have money, that's really where it's at. And then becomes a measure of the heart. But you're right, Kevin. We want leadership in Washington, D.C., in our state government, from individuals who have a biblical worldview, who are solid men and women of God, and who have a strong character and integrity, to be problem solvers, because we live in a complex world today. But what happens when we align with God's principles and precepts, those were designed to bless us, not to harm us.
Right.
And that's why, again, revival also comes in the culture as it relates to our debt, our relationship with Israel, how we raise and nurture our children in the education process, and a whole host of things. So abiding by God's principles and precepts, I think then you do get blessed.
If714.com is the website where you can go greater in depth on Bob's book, If 714, An Urgent Call for Revival. It's Time is the subtitle. Let's go to Missouri and speak with George real quick. George, thanks for being on. You're on with Kevin McCullough and Bob Vander. Hi.
Hey, thank you for doing what you're doing. Oh, I know how we can straighten out all these people that you were talking about how much billions they spend on trying to confuse us. I says, I know how we can spend. America has got so many resources, and one of them is just the farmer. And all these people that want to sue you and everything the government doesn't want to do and get into line with common sense. Well, you know, the farmers can do one big thing. They don't have to sell to commercial organizations. They can not sell to anybody and say, you know what? You can drive your car and have $30 a gallon, but can you do it on an empty stomach? Now, let's play the common sense game. You get in line, we'll feed you. I get tired of this. Can't win it one way, I'm going to play it another.
George, I'm not following your point. Relate to what? Hold on. Okay. Relate it to what we're discussing today: spiritual revival and how that impacts public policy.
Okay, I just was listening to the other part of your conversation earlier, but
right.
It just makes me mad that we think that we have no control over anything. The American people have more control. If it wasn't for that guy that made that person, there's people out there that make cakes and plumb your house and
right
and farm, and these people don't have to do that. Do you know what how stupid that was? They just lost a good baker up there in
Oregon. Yeah, I now I understand what you're saying. And Bob, what he's referring to is the, and this is something that I harp on every day. We have forces at work that are investing billions in marketing campaigns, in campaigns for public office, in laws that are being passed, in lobbyists that are proposing those laws and trying to get those laws passed. We have a culture that is readily drinking it up. In fact, they're drunk on the money and the energy that is spent to try to intentionally confuse moral rightness in our time. And part of what we do every day is try to unpack the confusion so that we can see what the truth is, get to the bottom line of where the truth is at. But in the effort of revival, that's going to take place individually in our hearts as well. Because if we're seeking God, if we're for His input on what we're doing, if we're asking Him to guide us and give us the clear direction, He's going to be faithful to do that for us.
Yeah, He really is. Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek ye first His kingdom and His righteousness, then all these things will be added unto you." And so I think that's where our focus needs to be. And I think we also live in a day of age where we don't have just 3 television stations, and one of them comes in fuzzy. We have a lot of television stations. We have an internet. There's a lot of places where you can get your information today. And that's what I like about, Kevin, what you're doing with this radio program and AFA is doing and several others. There's a lot more voices out there today that have a biblical worldview, have a Christian perspective, who's going to cut through all the white noise and going to be able to tell you what the truth is. And so that's where I want to allow them to confuse you. But you're right, it becomes more simple than that, and that's where about the book, If 714, where we turn our individual and collective hearts back to God and His principles, and He allows us to lead the way in a culture that desperately needs the truth.
The book is If 714, An Urgent Call for Revival. It's time. Bob Vander is the author. He's the president and the CEO of the Family Leader. They are the group of people that have more influence on the Iowa election cycle for the cause of what's true, what's just, what's good. And you need to pray for them because they play that important role early on. But also, if you would like to join, set a reminder, 7:14 in the morning or 7:14 in the evening, and pray that very prayer. Bob Vander of the Family Leader, thanks for being with us. Sure appreciate you being here today.
Kevin, always a privilege. God bless you, friend.
And if you want to join the Pray 2014 effort, where every Monday we give you a new focus to coordinate and organize your prayer life around, go to pray2014.com. If you want to see Bob's book, it's if714.com. And coming up next is Brian Fisher and Focal Point as AFR continues its great provision of information for you each weekday. I'm Kevin McCullough on AFA Today, here on AFR Talk.